Hello, everyone. I would like to invite you to join me on a journey of opaque and couched language as a panel of corporate executives struggle to articulate what it is that they are doing and why exactly it is they are doing it. It is a crash course in pablum and double talk. So, let's begin.
I know what you're thinking.
You do? Oh boy! A psychic!
We have a panel on diversity and inclusion, and it looks a little odd, but you know, we actually wanted to make it reflect sort of the diversity in the C-suites of the Fortune 500. So we didn't really have enough chairs for middle-aged white guys, but you know, we're going to try.
The same thing.
I had to say something.
I'm not sure I understand. You selected your panel purely on the basis of what they look like in relation to Fortune 500 CEOs? Or, no, I'm still confused.
So who we've got is Aaron Nutter, who's Director of Responsible Business Leadership at PwC, Cicely Joseph with Symantec, and Charles Smith with Guitar Center.
3 different companies, 3 different industries, and 3 different people in charge of diversity in their companies. All right, I am ready to be educated. How do diversity initiatives work in your business practices?
So, Aaron, let's talk about why we're here. The CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. What is that about?
Sure. Probably best to give it in 2 parts. Maybe the headline first, which would be a coalition of over 350 CEOs, corporate CEOs ranging 85 industries, including nonprofits and also some leaders in academic institutions. And these CEOs have signed up to say, look, this is on our radar. We are here to advance diversity and inclusion within the workplace. This, since the summer it launched in June, has really taken off and become the largest CEO-driven commitment around diversity and inclusion.
Okay, so a group of CEOs from all over the place signed on to the idea that diversity and inclusion are important. Fine and dandy. But I'm still curious to know what sorts of business practices result from such a commitment.
That would be the headline, but I think the story of how it came about probably adds a little bit of a foundation, and I think really some authenticity in terms of how and why it has gained so much momentum so quickly.
Oh, by all means. I love a good story.
So if you don't mind, I'll tell a little bit of the history here, but if you think back to the summer of 2016, a series of terrible tragedies across the country, racially driven. So you think about everything from Baton Rouge, St. Paul, shootings in Dallas, and so forth, and unfortunately, as we know, that list is actually pretty long, and it kept on going. And that coincided with Tim Ryan, our chairman, becoming chairman. He became chairman that summer. And he noticed pretty quickly that throughout our firm, inside our 4 walls, that none of this was being discussed at any level.
So police shootings and or the shootings of police were not being discussed at PricewaterhouseCoopers, a tax consulting business. Well, save for water cooler conversations, why would they be?
And one of the things that we are charged with as employees of PwC is to bring our whole selves to work, as we say. And he knew right off the bat that people were impacted by this, whether in those communities where these events were happened or simply by the dialogue and what was happening across society. And so he did something that most large firms would probably not do, but he took a day and said, stop, close your laptops, put your pens down. I want you to talk to your colleagues, to your peers, and have a conversation about what was happening in society.
So the chairman of a tax firm told his employees to stop working and to discuss alleged or explicit racially motivated shootings by and of police officers. Well, you're absolutely right. I cannot think of many business leaders who would think to do that.
That truly inspired Tim. He took that conversation to every CEO CEO interaction that followed from there. In a couple of over months, and probably tens of 20s or more of dialogues and conversations. And what he found out by talking to CEOs was this was absolutely on the CEO's radar. Some more vocal and out front on it. Some scared and not knowing what to do about it, right?
Right.
Knowing something needs to be done. The second thing was really around this idea that there was a role for CEOs and that they could do something driving it from the top. And the third was probably around this not being a competitive issue, but really being a societal issue. And that there was an opportunity here for the broader business community to come together at the CEO level and try to drive a greater impact.
So a bunch of CEOs decided they needed to do something about police shootings? I must be misunderstanding.
So out of that, CEO action was born. And it has started with a pledge, a simple pledge that basically anywhere where people are on their D&I journey, whether you're very out front or whether you're just getting started, could really partake and get involved. And at the highest level, the three pledge items were creating safe spaces for complex and often challenging discussions around diversity and inclusion.
This collective of CEOs is committed to creating safe spaces in their companies. Got it.
Implementing some form of unconscious bias training or implicit bias training, and the idea around awareness and what we all bring with us.
Unconscious bias training. Being trained to understand that, even if you know it or not, you are judging people without justification. Yes. And how is that not going to just lead to people walking on eggshells around each other and give people cause to accuse others of misdeeds in the absence of actual evidence?
And the third is around really sharing of actions, not only best practices, but also those that haven't worked, with the understanding that we could really learn from each other and we shouldn't really keep this just within our own four walls, but share those lessons for everyone else. So that has become the start of it. It has taken off from there.
So taken off, how many companies, CEOs have signed up?
Yeah, so over 350 at this point in time.
350 companies signed on for safe spaces and unconscious bias training in order to combat police shootings. Got it.
Great. So, Cicely, what was behind your CEOs signing on to this? I mean, what drove it from inside Symantec?
Yeah, so our CEO had been with the company about 10 months when we signed on to the pledge. And I think for him it was ongoing employee and external stakeholders bringing up the issue about, as a company, what is our commitment? Where are we headed with this? As a new leader, what is it you are planning on doing?
Planning on doing about police shootings?
So I think that was, and I think it was also his desire to really help the company move the needle. And move the needle in terms of, when you were talking, so some of, what I try to do is translate some of the diversity language, because I feel like I cross both worlds. I lead our sustainability practice, but I also have worked as our chief diversity officer. And when we were talking, I was thinking, a lot of what you're saying is so much about what we do in sustainability. So it's about collective action, right?
Right.
And I think that was really important for our CEO to be a part of something that was around collective action. It's around dialogue. Right? Which is the internal dialogue and encouraging the conversation. It's around culture, right? Which is the bias trainings and learning how to be a more inclusive company. And it's around transparency, which is about, sharing the practices that work and even the things that don't work that well, but being transparent and talking about it.
Transparent about things that work well for what? What exactly is the problem? What exactly is the goal? And how do you measure success in order to know what does or does not work well?
And I think our CEO was ready to engage on diversity in that space, and as a new leader, wanted to move us forward.
Wow. I feel so informed now.
So Charles, what about at Guitar Center?
I think, like Cecily's illustration, my CEO was relatively new to job. I think he's still putting his thumbprints on the organization, and specifically from a value standpoint. And I think he really wanted to make it clear that he was serious about his desire for gender parity and underrepresented minorities in the workforce.
Aha! Finally, two solid concepts: gender parity and unrepresented minorities in the workforce. Those are stated concerns of Guitar Center. Excellent. Now, I wonder if we will be told through what mechanisms of hiring and/or promotion practices Guitar Center has used to employ or advance people based on the arbitrary attributes of those defined demographics.
And at Guitar Center, we have a kind of a unique challenge in that, we're kind of have a rock and roll hangover, if you will, and that it's dominated by white males, the rock and roll industry is. But the music industry is so much broader, and we want to make sure that our stores reflect the communities in which we live and in which we work.
Too many white males. Guitar Center stores need to reflect the communities in which they reside. Okay, so do tell us how you're working to solve these problems.
So let's stay with that. You have a good outreach to consumers, right?
Right.
How are you trying to communicate this message that you're embracing the D&I issue?
Absolutely. And it's a twofold issue. It's really more getting our employer brand out there. We're a private company, so we don't have SEC filings. We don't do meaningful press releases generally, and that leaves gossip, innuendo, and the haters out there. And so it's really hard to get your employer brand out there for prospective associates to find out what it's like behind the door. And so this was a great way. And one of the things that we're doing is doing massive marketing through LinkedIn, for example, and other venues where we're telling stories about what it's like to work at the organization. And we're targeting, there's probably 200 groups that exist on LinkedIn that are based on underrepresented minorities, women's groups, LGBT, the whole spectrum. So it's a top of the funnel play from a recruiting effort for us and get our brand out there.
Okay, so you're targeting employment initiatives through LinkedIn, focusing on specific demographics of gender, race, and sexual orientation, while giving less or no such attention to anyone that falls outside of those categories. Got it.
So Cecily, you bridge sustainability and HR, or D&I at least, part of that. So what's different between the two? What are the conversations like? What's so different about this diversity and inclusion work instead of sustainability?
Well, I can tell you what used to be different, but I think it's definitely changing. It used to be different because I think that diversity used to be much more contained inside of the HR organization.
Diversity was contained in HR. What does that mean?
And so it was seen as an internal function. It was seen as, yes, attracting talent and advancing talent, but it was seen as we keep that inside. We don't necessarily talk about that externally. We don't really think about it in a broader way outside of the kind of HR, but also outside of the company.
Okay, so the issue of creating a diversified workforce, diversity defined as anyone who is non-male, non-white, and non-straight, was an internal HR issue. But now it is much more exposed, I guess.
And I think that's definitely shifted. I think regardless of where diversity sits in a company, it's now become very much about, I would say, there are four main pieces. So there's attracting, retaining, and developing talent.
Yes. How do you attract, retain, and develop talent with the filtering of diversity at the forefront of your hiring practices?
There's also the inclusive culture piece.
The inclusive culture piece. What is that?
There's how do we look at diversity throughout our entire value chain? So everything from community to our supply chain to our marketing, depending on the business. How are we integrating diversity in our value chain?
I don't know what you mean, but okay. How are you integrating diversity into your value chain?
And finally, how are we partnering and what's our thought leadership? And so I think that's evolved diversity to be much more, I guess, broadly implemented from a company's perspective. And that's why we're talking about it, right?
Right.
That's why we're building it into our brand. For Symantec, a big piece is attracting talent. We're a cybersecurity company. We're in tech. There's a shortage of talent. We need to attract the best and the brightest.
Oh, the best and the brightest. So, attract people on the basis of personal merit. Got it.
We want to cast our net as wide as possible to get talent that's different, that's unique. We want women. We want people of color. We want people to come and work at Symantec.
Oh, women and people of color. So, attract people on the basis of attributes other than merit. So, which is the first hiring filter, I wonder? Merited attributes or non-merited attributes? And whatever the answer is, it is still flirting with illegality.
And so in order to do that, we've got to show and demonstrate that we're a company that has an inclusive culture and that partners internally and externally on issues like diversity.
How? How do you show that?
Great. Aaron, how is PwC trying to drive it? I mean, you're a partner organization, and so people climb up that ladder to become partner. How are you driving that conversation? And are you getting engagement with the partners? Are they willing to spread that word and drive it deeper into the organization?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question.
It is not a fascinating question so much as it is a direct question. But now that our speaker has framed it like that, I wonder how, or if, he will answer it.
It's different, right?
Right.
It's very different when you have sort of the top-down model of maybe a public corporation and so forth. We have such a focus on our people. I mean, we are a people services firm. And so it is so important, and Cecil, you touched on a lot of the things that I would have said here, which is how do we embed this all the way through the system, from hiring, from how you actually recruit people, and is your application actually have bias in it itself, right, and all the way through. And I think what we're getting now, and it's a journey, is that partners are starting to understand the value that is brought by perspectives and experiences that are different from their own. Yeah.
None of that told us anything.
So, Charles, I'm just curious with your drive toward this. Is there a sustainability program at Guitar Center, or is it involved in any of this? How do you approach that?
Yes. How?
There isn't. And, I think retailers are notoriously late adopters to pretty much everything. And we're new to diversity and dipping our toe in the sustainability pond. So, baby steps.
Guitar Center does not have a sustainability program. So they have no method for planning ahead for the future value and perpetuation of their business. Got it.
So do you think this focus on diversity and inclusion is a good way to sort of enter into that conversation?
Absolutely. I think there's, the ESGs, there's a lot of parallels in terms of gender parity and reducing inequality, and I think we could delve deeper into it.
Great.
Yeah, great. But how?
So I'm going to go over to sidebar. Elaine, do you have any questions that have come in?
Definitely. So, this is a really timely topic also. There's been a backlash against diversity in the country especially. And so, Colin Tetreault from ASU made a great point on Twitter. He said, I often think diversity is everywhere. Inclusion is how we purposely integrate it. And so the question is, how do you build empathy within the organization without alienating those who think differently?
How do you build empathy in the organization? So, anyone who doubts or opposes diversity initiatives lacks empathy?
How do you make this a priority when there are so many other initiatives? How do you get that culture to change in terms of becoming a more empathic organization?
The writer of the question is asking for one of them to divulge how they do something. So, best of luck.
So Charles, I think, guitar centers are all over the country and in very different areas. So I guess you're probably the logical one to answer this. How do you look at that and deal with the different discussions that are going to go on in West Hollywood or in Arkansas? Sure.
I think diversity and inclusion is not a light switch you turn on and off. I think it's something that it's part of our culture. It's something that grows. It takes years to come to fruition, I think.
Diversity is not a light switch. That implies there is a non-diverse state and a diverse state. I wonder what metric tells a company that they have reached the state of diversity.
And so I think it's all about having those sometimes uncomfortable discussions, having the bias training and that sort of thing with our stores.
Uncomfortable discussions and bias training will lead to diversity. Eventually. Got it.
But I think, more importantly, there's a business play here too. If there's a woman walking down the sidewalk with her child and she wants to sign the child up for lessons, she might feel uncomfortable about going in to a store that's filled with 26-year-old white guys and asking questions about buying her kid a guitar.
Because that woman is a racist and or a sexist? Is that the kind of clientele that Guitar Center is concerned about attracting?
It's human nature. People want to, and you could substitute the woman analogy with any a person of color or anything like that. And I think people have a tendency and feel more comfortable doing business and talking to and working with someone who looks like them.
So Guitar Center wants to promote diversity by making sure that like only has to engage with like. Got it.
And so I think working through that from a business standpoint and having our store managers really understand that there's a business impact and that the stores actually function smoother with a diverse workforce, is the approach that we're taking.
So that's Guitar Center's approach. Got it.
Can I
Cecily, you're a global company, so you're in different geos and whatnot. So
it makes me think of the conversations that often happen around diversity, where you have somebody say, we need to just do this because it's the right thing to do. And we think about that a lot of times when we think about sustainability and corporate responsibility, I guess also. But I think we have tended to move away from that, right?
Right.
That's not why we do all of the things. Well, we do it because we know it's the right thing to do. But that's not why we're getting business to believe in this, in any of the work that you do, or in diversity either. It's because there's a business case for it, right?
Right?
Ah, the business case. I did a long video around that argument as well. I cannot wait to hear our speaker's business case, given that she provides us one.
We know that companies that are more diverse, organizations that are more diverse, are going to be more innovative, more creative. There's research, read the recent McKinsey study that's out there. It shows that companies that have leadership that are more diverse, more gender equity, more gender parity, they have more leaders that are culturally and ethnically diverse, are financially performing better, right?
Right?
So the lesson here is that companies should be hiring and promoting people on the basis of their race, gender, and/or ethnicity. Honestly, what other conclusion am I supposed to be drawing here?
So there's a business case for it. And so what I would say to people who are not empathetic,
aka those who disagree with me,
is if you want your company to win and to be competitive, then you need to get on this train, right?
Right.
Because that's the train we're on, and that's the path we're on as a company.
Yes, Symantec is on the diversity train as a company. Got it.
I think if I can just add on to that, I think in this political climate, a lot of CEOs are taking a stance about what's happening out there, whether it's a Charlottesville or anything like that, and saying, hey, this is not who we are as a culture. This is not who we endorse. This is not how we behave at this organization. And it's not one or two. It's dozens, if not hundreds, of Fortune 500 CEOs taking a stand on that. And I think that's driving a little bit of the change faster.
Like a PwC.
So the fear of being perceived as being a racist company is driving CEOs to institute hiring and promotion practices based on race. Got it.
Yeah, and I'd love to make a comment on the business case. So at the gathering we had a couple weeks ago, we had the privilege of having Ken Frazier, the CEO of Merck, speak. And in fact, someone posed the question about the business case for diversity, and his response, and I can't quote him directly, was, what's the business case for homogeneity? Is it just flipping that around on the person asking that question and say, well, explain to me why a room full of the same perspectives and voices will produce a better outcome. Yeah.
Skin color and gender determine the kind and quality of one's thinking. So says Price Waterhouse Cooper. Got it. I was thinking today about why I find these videos about diversity, especially in the business arena, so fascinating. Partially, as I've said in the past, you never know what they are going to say next. Because inherently, what diversity officers are responsible for, and our last speaker there alluded to it, is how best to combat monochromaticality. And that is how to ensure that there are not too many people of the same visible kind in a company. You could have employees from America and Canada and France and Germany and Poland, etc. But despite there being a wide range of cultural diversity, it would still be wrong if they were all white guys. And that's what it comes down to with diversity in business: the inherent necessity to discriminate on factors other than merit. And this concerns me greatly. Aren't we supposed to strive to be better than that? How do we advance beyond the considerations of what's on the surface in working together if our working together is determined by what's on the surface? As always, thank you for watching.